What's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going team by team.
I would be very careful about slinging stuff.
Am I going to get sued?
You got legal on this?
Let's send you out on the right note. PFF sucks. Have a great day, everybody.
Wow. All right, welcome into the PFF NFL podcast, and welcome to Free Agency Week. Monday, March the 11th. That means the money's flying around, the deals are being done, trades are happening, and it's all going down already over the weekend. So in order to dive into all that, we need the great Brad Spielberger, the authority when it comes to free agency, NFL contracts, roster construction, and all of the above. How's it going, Brad?
Going fantastic. Yeah, it's Christmas week. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So we're going to dive into all that. But first, there's also mock drafts all the way up on PFF.com. You can go and mock draft yourself using our PFF's mock draft simulator, the best by far in the business. And you can get 30% off the PFF mock draft sim using the promo code 30MDS. 30MDS gets you 30% off all the features, all of the PFF subscriptions. So dive in there, fix your team in the mock if your team's not particularly active in free agency, or even once they've made the free agency moves, get in there and fix your team. 30MDS is a promo code. All right, Brad, let's start with some of the moves that have already been made, and in particular, the re-signings that have been made, because some pretty big names have been re-signing right before the deadline, or, a day or two before the deadline. Some that I expected actually would have made it to free agency and at least tested the waters, but as you made the point last time out, evidently, despite the fact that the the legal tampering period doesn't start until 4 p.m. today, there is some perhaps illegal tampering going on, or at least exploration of markets before these deals are getting done. So I guess let's start with, what was your favorite of the big re-signings that's been made?
Yeah, I think it's been good to see a lot of the franchise tag guys get their deals done already. And I am a little bit surprised, in a positive way for the Chicago Bears, that they were able to keep this Jalen Johnson number where they did. Not just the 4 years, 76, but the $44 million in fully guaranteed / 2-year cash flow is outside the top 5 at cornerback right now. I guess maybe Tre'Davious White is no longer on the roster, but it's behind his contract and a bunch of metrics. So, look, Johnson is a 24-year-old all-pro Pro Bowler that was our highest-graded corner in the entire NFL. Had the turnover production for the first time in a while. I think also probably tried to argue, hey, look what happens when you finally get me a defensive line to play behind. Yeah, of course I'm going to make more plays as a DB when my line is actually getting pressure and helping me out. So I'm surprised this didn't reset the market, and the corner market is really stagnant right now. Jair Alexander at the top of it still, and he signed his extension a couple years ago.
It is kind of incredible. I mean, obviously, you have a certain rooting interest in the Chicago-based sports franchises. So for you to like this move is not exactly surprising. But I'm with you. For Jalen Johnson to have the season he had and then come into an offseason where the salary cap jumped like $30 million, and this not to be the market resetting top cornerback deal that's been done is kind of crazy. I mean, Chicago wins from seemingly playing hardball with him and stringing it out as long as they did, and somehow got a really good team-friendly deal out of it.
Yeah, and it's fairly rare. Not all the time. Sometimes people use this as too much of a bright line rule. But when the franchise tag number is $19.8 million, and we're talking about a second contract, 25-year-old player, it's fairly rare to not exceed that number in the average annual value of your contract. So that's one. Two is, L'Jarius Sneed also gets tagged. The best corner, in my opinion, on the market now is Kendall Fuller, who is a 29-year-old looking for a third deal, has had some injuries, though he's played a ton of snaps the last couple of years, so he's been healthy enough. But and graded extremely well for us too. But yeah, it's just like a lot of things, market factors lined up in his favor, and Chicago still did well. And I will just say, obviously I'm a fan, but if I hated the deal, I would say that as well. I think I called the Chase Claypool trade a fleecing 10 seconds after it happened. So I am objective. If anything, I might be too negative about the Bears sometimes.
Yeah, like the difference between Jalen Johnson and Kendall Fuller as, the sort of potential elite number one corner is night and day. I mean, you're right. Like, he was left as the lone guy standing if you wanted to test free agency, as if you need an impact difference-making corner, assuming you're not trading for L'Jarius Sneed, he's it. And still decided to sign and do a deal. Now, cash flow is pretty favorable for him, right? But it is kind of amazing that this was not, an absolute breaking of the bank type of contract at corner.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So that was a good one. And it's also just, I'm happy for the players, that we've had movement on franchise tag guys. We'll probably get some more too. I think the others are going to want to wait to see how the markets play out of their position once free agency kicks off. And then I think we could get a couple more of those done in the near future as well.
One sort of blockbuster deal that got done that I certainly didn't expect to happen was the Chris Jones deal finally got over the line. And it was the deal that I think he's been looking for. That is the market resetting money. He's getting paid monster money. He's exceeding Aaron Donald, right, in terms of average per year, $31.5 million, something like that per season. $100 million deal, like $100 million, just the money's everywhere. So the Chris Jones thing finally got over the line. I guess at that point you have to give Kansas City credit where it's due. They risked losing Chris Jones by franchise tagging Snead to potentially trade him away, and they ended up getting it over the line before free agency started. So now they've paid for it. This is the market resetting deal, but they re-signed Chris Jones, I think their most important defensive player, to a big monster deal and keep him in the building looking for this three-peat next year.
Yeah, and this is also interesting because, there was a lot of belief that it was going to be really, really hard to tether any deal to that Aaron Donald contract you mentioned, where, the young guys coming up, your last year, Quinn Williams, Jeffrey Simmons, all those guys, Deron Payne. Then we get Madubuike, and again, Madubuike is just a, $24.5 million with Quinn Williams at 24, although Madubuike's guarantees are exorbitant and extremely strong for the player, which has been a typical Ravens structure recently. But there was clearly like, okay, Donald's deal is being treated as an outlier. He's a first-ballot Hall of Famer, one of the best defensive players of all time. Maybe Chris Jones isn't one of the best defensive players of all time, but he's also, at this point, a clear-cut first-ballot Hall of Famer, too. And he was finally able to say, no, I'm not even going to split the gap. And all right, the young guys are at 24. Aaron Donald's at 31. I'll get 28. No, I'm going to exceed Aaron Donald. But yeah, the 3-year cash flow of $95 million, so the same there. You said a little bit extra guarantee. I think it's just over $100 million in total guarantees. So yeah, this is a massive, massive deal. Jones deserves every penny of it, but also those young guys just became more of a value because it's no longer an outlier with Aaron Donald. There's now 2 contracts up above $30 million at the interior defender position.
What is the sort of structure of this deal going to play out as being? Because I think a lot of people were looking at, if Chris Jones hits the open market, it's more of a sort of, you're comfortable with like the next 3 years of Chris Jones, but are you comfortable getting to 5 years of Chris Jones? This is a 5-year contract, right? But is it actually a 5-year deal?
Yeah, so the structure is pretty aggressive where this year's cap hit is $7 million and it jumps to 35 next year and then 41 the year after that. So it's a 3-year deal, and then you can go from there, essentially. But the first 3 years are absolutely locked in. Like you're not paying him, 1 year $60 million, as I think how it would break down for the first year, and the guarantees for 2026, that third season, kick in 2025. So it's effectively like $395 is a borderline lock to happen, and then we'll see from there. So, and that was the Aaron Donald deal, was $395. So clearly that's the entire benchmark there, but it also wasn't like crazy backloaded, right? Like when it first came out that he was getting this number, I thought, okay, but maybe we're getting, some ridiculous last couple of years, especially when you see 5-year term. And yeah, the salary in the last year is $35 million, but that's not that crazy. It's flatter than I expected. So yeah, long answer short, it's a 3-year and we'll see, but the 3 years are not some, way below that get boosted. It's a legit 3 years.
Right. Where does that take him in relation to Mahomes' contract? How many more years of that monster we got left?
We got, let's see. So he signed it in 7, 8, and 9. So he signed it after 2019. So going into 20, still have 2 years left. We still have like 8 or 9 years of that contract left.
So he's still
but obviously, he already did re-up the one time, moved the cash forward. And I think when they did that, I remember what it was like in 2026 or 7, I forget what it is now. Like, it's clearly, all right, we're going to sign a new contract entirely. But yeah, I mean, that thing it exists in perpetuity effectively.
Yeah. Just juggling the financial decisions. And if you have a family like I do, then you need to get term life insurance to protect them. It's the smartest financial decision you can make, and this year is the perfect time to get it done so you can focus on whatever else the year has in store for you. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help you get a high-quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Fabric has flexible policies that fit your family and your budget with quality policies like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Get your personalized quote in just minutes and then apply it when it's convenient for you. It's all online and on your schedule. You can go from start to covered in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in minutes at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. MEET fabric.com/PFFNFL. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Insurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. Okay, I guess the biggest topic of the weekend news that we have to talk about is Russ signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers for about $7.92 so that it fully stiffs the Denver Broncos on what they already owe him.
I love it. I really, really love it. I think we always sometimes lose sight, I don't say always sometimes, lose sight of like value and how value factors into the conversation. Like we look at the player. I know Russ is a meme now, and we're gonna have Broncos country, Steelers nation, let's cook, whatever, yada yada. A veteran minimum contract for Russell Wilson is a good deal. It's a great value for Pittsburgh. He is a clear market upgrade over Kenny Pickett. And I guess Mason Rudolph, if you want to factor him in as well. Look, there are rewards, right? He plays outside of structure. He takes way too many sacks. He doesn't throw over the middle of the field that much, which is kind of Arthur Smith's, bread and butter to a degree. But there is no doubt in my mind this is a great value for Pittsburgh. And they just, things lined up nicely. Well, here it's a competition. It's not a competition. It's Russell Wilson's job. And I think, look, I mean, this is a playoff team with really bad quarterback play last year. You get a revitalized Russ who's looking to prove something. Maybe you win in the first round potentially with this team.
Yeah, I mean, I like the deal. I think you're right. Like, the contract is everything, right? He goes from one of the worst value quarterbacks in the NFL. Like, they literally released him on the very second his extension kicked in. That's how bad that contract was. And then you go from that. So one of the worst deals out there, he's not playing particularly well relative to his contract, to he's literally signing for as little as he can sign just so he screws the team that screwed him as hard as he can possibly do it. So you're getting whatever Russ is for as cheap as it's possible to get him for, and that makes him a really good value quarterback at this point. Like, you're getting effectively the rookie contract deal or the rookie contract bonus, except you're getting it for a quarterback towards the end of his time. And okay, you're right. There are limitations to what Russell Wilson can do at this point in his career, but he's not a bad quarterback. And first year in Denver was rough, but second year in Denver was okay. With Sean Payton, they just determined very early that it wasn't going to be good enough for where they wanted to go and wanted to go in a different direction. But I am actually really fascinated by Russell Wilson in that Arthur Smith offense with the weapons in Pittsburgh, with an offensive line that is improving and reasonable to start with. Like, Russell Wilson's biggest strength in his career has always been deep passing, the kind of passes that you want to manufacture off the back of that play action game that they want to be employing the whole time. So even if you only get, a comparable version of Russell Wilson to last year, Pittsburgh generally is good enough for that to be good, that to be impactful. I mean, they generally make the playoffs or get very close to making the playoffs with worse quarterback play than that. So it feels like this is a pretty good deal for them.
You have a 1-2 punch at running back that is, you could argue one of the better combos. Not either individual player is solid, not great, but I think it's a great combination, and they do different things very well. Arthur Smith's going to run the ball a ton, going to try to throw the ball 20 times. I like it for George Pickens, too. George Pickens, to me, is now the Cortland Sutton. Like, when Russ went to Denver, I was like, this is obviously the guy who's going to benefit the most. He has the jump ball, go up and get it ability down the sideline. Obviously, Pickens has more than that to his game, but if I'm George Pickens, I'm probably pretty happy with this move.
Absolutely. I was just looking at his play action numbers from last year alone. I was going to run it for his career, but I don't have that kind of time right now. Just last year, play action, Russell Wilson, 11 touchdowns, 1 interception, a 10.9% big time throw rate, which is madness. It's like 2.5 times what it is without play action last season. His turnover-worthy play rate didn't jump. His average depth of target was almost 11 yards downfield. Even with that, his adjusted completion rate is 81%, and his passer rating is 118. So even within the Denver offense last year, just using play action, Russell Wilson's numbers were nuts. I think that's a Russell Wilson constant throughout his NFL career. You put him in an Arthur Smith offense that functions, and okay, you might get people frustrated by the lack of usage of certain players, but generally that will produce some, I think, pretty impressive results, certainly in specific areas that, you're right, I think play into the skill set of some players that they have. George Pickens, first and foremost amongst them. Like, this should be a good deal for Pittsburgh. I mean, they've got him and they're paying him nothing, and I think he's actually a good fit for this offense.
Yeah, no question about it. So it'll be fun to watch and monitor, and just, the defense, like, you need to do something. And they still need to, address the secondary there and add some more pieces. I think off-ball linebacker will be a focus of theirs. Omar Khan was, like, pretty transparent about that in Indy. But it's a good roster in a lot of places. The quarterback play was just really, really hard to get by with last year.
And just to explain the contract thing for anyone, the Broncos are on the hook for $39 million in cash to Russell Wilson this year, right? And that only changes depending on the contract he signs for the next team. So if he signs for somebody who wants to pay him $10 million, that $10 million comes off the $39 million that Denver owes him, correct?
Yep. So now it's 1.2 from Pittsburgh and 37.8 from Denver.
Right. So consequently, Russ wanted to sign for the absolute minimum so that Denver is on the hook for as much money as humanly possible to him this season.
I would guess, too, which I think would be smart, is if I'm Pittsburgh and he brought him in, apparently he was there for 6 hours, whatever, you say, okay, if you do this, we're going to go sign a new center because they cut Mason Cole. We'll go get a number 3 receiver because they need, they move on from Allen Robinson. Like, you also, if you're Russ, probably say, look, I can go be a backup or a bridge or whatever for 10 different teams for a minimum. What are you going to do with the savings? And I'm guessing Pittsburgh had some good answers there.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I mean, Russ, I'm sure his primary motivating factor was stiffing the team that stiffed him. But yes, you would want to know what they plan on doing with that gift that you're bringing them along with your contract. So I like this move for both concerns. And for Russell Wilson's point of view, by the way, I think it makes sense as well for the same reasons, right? It's a good match. It's a good mesh. And it should be successful. And the fact that he's able to bring this gift of a contract with him is a win for all concerned. So I think that's a good deal. Let's touch on the other two other quarterback moves that got made. I guess let's cover the Baker Mayfield thing first. Baker gets his payday finally. He gets his $100 million. Like it took 2+ years from the time he was supposed to get it, but he eventually found his way there. Good for Baker.
Great for Baker. Honestly, this deal makes me so happy. It's good for Baker, it's good for the Buccaneers, and it's good for the National Football League. We're finally getting a mid-tier marketed quarterback. It has been the biggest challenge, and I think maybe we'll finally see the players realizing, like we just talked about Russ. The Russ situation, and obviously that's a bit of an outlier, a bit of an extreme, but like if you're always chasing top dollar, you're probably just going to get cut sooner. What if Baker's like average the first 2 years and Tampa says, okay, we owe him $40 million in cash in 2026 when guys will probably be making $75 million a year at that point. Like I think it behooves everyone. But yeah, good to see Baker get his deal, at least $50 million, probably 2 years, 60, and then either it's an extension or maybe they move on. But yeah, I'm happy for all parties here. Tampa also did well to, not get afraid, not jump the gun. Baker didn't even go to free agency, so obviously, the market wasn't expected to be super, super strong. But yeah, Baker also deserves this. The guy has a new offensive coordinator every 6 weeks. Now Liam Cohen, he reunites with, who he worked with the LA Rams last year. I like this for everybody.
And that, I think, is an important point. We got another one of these middle class quarterback contracts, and this one with free agency looming, like the frenzy of the marketplace, the inflationary factor of free agency and the bidding process that everybody goes through. was potentially there for Baker Mayfield, and yet the Bucs were still able to get it over the line at this middle-class deal that at the end of the season, this was what everybody was calling for, right? Baker goes back to Tampa. He gets a payday. It's not going to break the bank. We find some, sensible price tag that everybody's happy with. And ultimately, that's where we ended up. It just took like almost all the way till free agency to happen. But I think, that's an important milestone for everybody that we got this middle-class deal without the free agent marketplace inflating it all to hell and making it ridiculous.
Yeah. No doubt about it. So it's Tampa's, the way they've navigated the post Brady era too. Like, good for them. They just, was it 1 year, $4 million, and now you can maybe squabble with doing this deal, but it's totally safe. It's fine. It's Geno Smith's deal plus a little bit of inflation. It's like the Derek Carr is a good example where he's similar. It's 4 years, 150, I want to say, with 3 years, $100 million, but they can't get out of his deal after the first year. It's why he's still on the roster. The Bucs could just say, all right, 1 year, $40 million. We basically paid him a franchise tag, and it didn't work out. We're moving on. That's at their disposal if it goes really, really poorly in 2024.
But it's a good point that this kind of structure, this kind of price tag actually does insulate the player a degree because it starts to look reasonable quite quickly, right? Like, and if you do anything other than completely stink, like if you're just okay, if you're just a good, half-decent starting quarterback that obviously has limitations and, isn't going to be a superstar, but is solid, that type of deal starts to look quite reasonable. I mean, it's kind of like the Jared Goff thing, right? Jared Goff's contract was literally used as a make-weight on a trade just to get it off the books. But then a couple of years in, once you've paid all the guaranteed money, like that deal looks good. So the Lions are kind of like, we're Jared Goff has been playing fine. We're fine with this deal. Like, we are paying him good money, but we're not paying him top of the market money, even though when he signed it, that deal would have been, much higher because of the guarantees and all that kind of stuff. If you can actually convince a solid starting quarterback, but not a star, to take a middle-class contract, there's actually a much better chance that he lives out the duration of it, or at least a bigger part of it, and actually earns more money long-term because of it.
Yep, that's the beauty of it. I think we are going to start to see that kind of more and more be understood. And I think it's just good for the league, too, because, like, Baker made the playoffs in his first year there, right? Like, there's a reason it's reasonable to expect that they'll continue to grow, get better, and they'll be, again, I don't know if we're saying they're contenders by any stretch, but I think it benefits the league. There's more good to above average, interesting, exciting teams. And when there's this quarterback shuffling all the time, it's harder to do that.
And that Baker, I think everyone kind of looks at Baker Mayfield last season and go, okay, he was pretty good, but you're probably buying somewhere near the high end of Baker Mayfield versus the low end. I mean, we saw, the previous season with Carolina and the Rams, like that was much more of the low end of Baker Mayfield. But even last season, like if you look at PFF grades and a few other stats, that was not Baker Mayfield's best season. It wasn't even, I think, his second best season in the NFL. Like it was solid. It was a good version of Baker Mayfield, certainly relative to the year before. But I think you could also talk yourself into the idea that there is a better version of Baker to come. If we pair him with Liam and he's comfortable in the environment and we bring people back, and like we're not necessarily buying at the apex, at the peak of what Baker is capable of doing. There is a better version of this guy in there.
Yep. No doubt about it.
And, I'm well documented in being out on Baker Mayfield going forward. But I will say, given the way his Browns career ended, or at least the way that it went from, the end of 2020, like he was on the cusp of getting the next big, second contract from a player that had been drafted. Remember, he comes in, he rescues this franchise. He wins a playoff game or makes the playoffs for the first time in ages. Baker Mayfield was like the guy that had saved the Browns franchise. The jersey with the endless number of names on it. Baker had stopped the names, right? He was the guy that had been there for a few years. And then, week 2 of that 2021 game, he injures his shoulder. And rather than shutting him down, they played him throughout the entirety of that season, injuring it worse as the year went on. And then essentially held that over him. Instead of giving him the big extension, they went, actually, you know what? We're going to go in a different direction. We're going to move heaven and earth, bring in Deshaun Watson. We're going to kick you to the curb. And for actually gritting it out, for trying to, do what was best for the team rather than himself, Baker Mayfield cost himself a $100 million deal with the Cleveland Browns. Almost his entire career goes up in smoke given what happened in Carolina and the Rams. It's just great from him on a personal level that he finally gets the payday that he was right on the cusp of getting before he got hosed, frankly.
And it just shows you like the razor's edge of all these things. Like it really is. And this isn't me just making an excuse for one of my predictions are wrong today. But no, like it's funny, like, you know, and having these conversations now in hindsight and looking back, like the difference between, that happening or him signing a 1-year, $4 million flyer, like it really is. The margin is so thin. It's kind of crazy when you hear some of the stories in the background of how these things, like manifest or don't. And then again, but flash forward 1 year, like you said, Carolina disaster, Rams kind of a disaster. Then you go to Tampa, have a good year, and boom, here we are.
Yeah, he parlayed like the Bucs were the only team in the NFL that would have given him a starting opportunity last year, and he turns that into a $100 million deal off the back of one strong season. So kind of a crazy – I mean, Baker Mayfield's career continues to be this absolutely insane roller coaster ride, not just in the NFL, but from start to finish, college all the way through to now. It's nuts. One other quarterback that's been on the move is Mac Jones, traded to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Another guy who's had – not even a roller coaster, just a strong start. So I guess it is a roller coaster, but it's been just the very start of a roller coaster, right? You go up the thing and then whoo, straight down, and that's where we've been now. We're now straight down to the point where we are signing as Trevor Lawrence's backup.
He's from Jacksonville, so that part's positive. That's a slight upward, adjustment on the rail on the roller coaster rail.
A little bump.
But yeah, no, it's tough, man. This 2021 class. I mean, Zach Wilson, after that trade too, because Wilson's owed about twice as much as Mac Jones. I don't know if New York can even get a pick for him unless they eat a bunch of the money there.
Right.
And then, of course, the Justin Fields situation ties to Russell Wilson too. If Kirk Cousins goes back to Minnesota, maybe that makes Atlanta a player again. If not, I don't know what they do.
Yeah. There were reports before the weekend that the Mac Jones market had been surprisingly strong, and there were a bunch of teams interested in but now it seems that must have only been as a backup, like as a reclamation project. Yeah. Nobody's interested in Mac Jones as a starter. Plenty of teams are interested in him to kick the tires and see if we can, turn him around as a backup option. But that's where we are right now with Mac Jones. Like, we have seen you play your way to the bench, and now we're vaguely interested in seeing if we can turn you around from the bench. But your time as a starter here is done.
Yep. I mean, 6th-round pick from a playoff team. That would suggest that is the perception across the league.
Another trade that was made, Jerry Jeudy finally got out of Denver he seems like he's been on the trade block for multiple years at this point. Finally gets gone to the Cleveland Browns, which now starts to give them a really interesting receiving core. And Jerry Jeudy, it's funny because as soon as Jeudy goes on the move, you get the highlight reels of Jerry Jeudy show up on Twitter, and the highlight reels of Jerry Jeudy are spectacular and always have been, but that's not the issue with Jerry Jeudy. It's not the highlights, it's everything else.
Yes. The drops did come down. I'm still in the Jerry Jeudy truther camp. I haven't left yet. I'm still there. I still watch his tape, and he can separate it very, very well. The intermediate and deep level, he can get open. Yeah, I'm not in the locker room. I don't know. I'm not Steve Smith Sr. We'll put it that way. But I like it. In a vacuum, I like it. Also, it is a big salary. Obviously, you're bringing in a 5th-year option. But because he missed some time, it's the lowest 5th-year option amount possible, right around $13 million. I guess they don't extend him. Maybe they'll just kind of let him play it out. Him and Jedrick Wills both going into 5th-year option years. But I don't know. I like it. I'm a fan. That receiving core now, too. Amari, Jeudy, Elijah Moore, David Njoku, and then some kind of ancillary pieces. Cedric Tillman, David Bell. There's no excuses for Joe Flacco in Cleveland. Joe Flacco better be consistently good on that football team.
Joe Flacco. That's a good receiving core. It's good. It is interesting, though, because, Jerry Jeudy, I think, he has been underachieving at this point in his NFL career relative to certainly my expectations and some others. Amari Cooper, I don't think you can call him underachieving, but he seems to reach the point where everybody thinks that Amari Cooper should be doing more, even though I'm not certain that's reasonable to expect. So slightly, there's some slight flavors of underachievement to Amari Cooper's NFL career. It is this weird receiving group where you're like, okay, on paper, I actually love it. I'm with you. Cooper, Jeudy, Elijah Moore's good. Cedric Tillman is more of a big-bodied, physical type receiver. David Njoku was spectacular last year. That's a good-looking receiving group. On the other hand, all of Elijah Moore falls into this bucket, I guess, a little bit as well. Like, each one of them, I think the hype or the perception seems to be higher than the reality of them.
No question about it, and the consistency isn't quite there. But the funny thing is, then you get Amari Cooper going for like 300 yards in a game last year, and they're all capable of doing that. I think the issue is they don't just all have like 80 yards a game every week. They just have four catches for 28 yards, and then they'll have 7 for 158 and 2 touchdowns. But it's kind of erratic.
I don't remember where the Cleveland Browns were on that NFLPA report card when it comes to nutrition. But I would only imagine that drinking AG1 would improve the production of everybody in that receiving core. Taking care of your health isn't always easy, but it should at least be simple. And that's why for the last year or so, we on the PFF NFL podcast have been drinking AG1 every day, no exceptions. Just one scoop mixed in water once a day, every day. And it makes us all feel energized and ready to take on the day and crush free agency. That's because each serving of AG1 delivers the daily dose of vitamins, minerals, pre- and probiotics, and more. And it's a powerful, healthy habit that's also powerfully simple. With AG1, you're giving your body high-quality nutrition because every batch of AG1 goes through a rigorous testing process so you know it's safe. And the ingredients are sourced for absorption, potency, and nutrient density. We like to drink AG1 first thing in the morning, which is recommended for optimal nutrition absorption. Fill up the shaker with extra cold water, add 1 scoop of AG1, shake it up, and you're ready to go. If we're running short on time and can't mix the AG1 before heading out, grab a travel pack. Each is an individual serving of AG1 that's easy to mix on the go, helping ensure you get your daily nutrients no matter what. If there's one product we had to recommend to elevate your health, it's AG1, and that's why we've partnered with them for so long. So if you want to take ownership of your health, start with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 and K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase at drinkag1.com/PFFNFL. That's drinkag1.com/PFFNFL. Check it out. Another move, Brad, is for your hometown Bears signing Kevin Byard. So they've kind of parlayed the releasing of Eddie Jackson into Kevin Byard. That feels like a pretty good upgrade.
It does. But here's where the objectivity comes in. I do like it. I think Kevin Byard's a great football player. In Tennessee, he was like the vocal leader, all those things. I don't think his tenure in Philadelphia, it's fair to say that he got to a team that was decimated with injury in the secondary at that point. Like Avonte Maddox was out at that point, and they struggled. He's still a very, very good player. For us, he always doesn't miss a tackle. He's super sound in coverage, always in the right spot. In a buyer's market at safety, and we haven't seen the details yet, but the initial reporting was 2 years, $15 million. That's a good deal for a 31-year-old safety in a market with a million options. But yeah, I'm not mad at it. But it's a good payday for Byard as well.
There's also been a bunch of moves happening already today on Monday before all the madness kicks off. We've had a few signings, had a few re-signings. The Lions are re-signing guard Graham Glasgow to a 3-year, $20 million deal that includes $9.5 million guaranteed, according to Schefter. Number one, that obviously re-signs a starting caliber guard for the Lions, but it also presumably pushes Jonah Jackson to the free agency door, and he's almost certainly going to be on the open market at this point.
That's my perception as well. I really think they're not going to do both. It was one or the other, and I've said it not to be anti-Jonah Jackson. I think he's going to get way more than I think he should get. And every conversation I've had has been he's going to get $12+ million a year. I finally updated my number to reflect that. I had it at around 10, and even that number was he's young, early, good draft status, and I've just heard positive things about him. But I think Detroit made the correct decision. Obviously, Jonah's about 5 years younger than Graham Glasgow, but I think they were similar players last year. Glasgow can play both sides of the line at both guard spots. He's played some center too. I would have made the same decision and maybe spent that money you're not spending now on Jackson, go spend on defense, defensive line, secondary, whatever. I think it was the correct either or if it was an either or.
And the Lions, a team that obviously made the NFC Championship game that was very close to making it to the Super Bowl, they are very intact. Like, there's not a lot of holes in terms of obvious starter gaps on this team heading into free agency, let alone heading into the draft, where, you know, you talk about trying to make all your moves in free agency so that you get to the draft without needing to fill them. They might have filled them before they even make it to free agency at this rate.
No, for sure. I mean, obviously coming off the injury again, but like they already got Emmanuel Mosley back on a 1-year deal again as well, who when healthy is a great player. Hopefully he has the like Jason Verrett path and can stay healthy and play some good football. But yeah, they didn't create new holes going into this offseason. They do need to add a defensive line and secondary, but we already knew that. And they're kind of, like you said, you had the draft in as well. They're well positioned, no question about it.
The Jags also signed center Mitch Morse, who was released from the Buffalo Bills. I think he signed for like 2 years, $10 million, $10.5 million, something like that. That at least, okay, Mitch Morse I don't think is coming off a particularly good season, but that at least I think is a good schematic fit. Like, the Jags move their offensive linemen around a lot. They like pull blockers. They like to get guys out in space. That's obviously Mitch Morse's forte, given his size, given his athleticism. He's a kind of poor man's Jason Kelsey, if you want to view it that way. I think schematically this is a nice fit for them.
He worked with Doug Peterson in Kansas City, too, so there's some familiarity there. And you know, I know they used the third-round pick, what was it, last year or 2 years ago on Luke Fortner. He just had not been kind of good enough at this point. And Trevor Lawrence was under siege, particularly in quick pressure. I think they were 31st for us in pressures under 2.5 seconds. And you have Lawrence injured, 8 different ways throughout the course of the year. So I like this one a lot, too. It also offers a high floor as a pass protector.
Right.
Like, I mean, you look at his grade. I think his lowest pass block grade ever is like a 68. So
no, it's higher.
He's very high floor there.
He's never been below 70 as a pass blocker in his NFL career. So that's what, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 seasons straight of 70. Lowest is 70.1. So 70 plus PFF pass blocking grade every single season of his career. Yeah, you're right. That's stability. Like, we'll get what we can out of the run game and all those kinds of things, but he is here to not be a liability in the middle of this offensive line for Trevor Lawrence. And, the entire Trevor Lawrence season last year, the first half, I guess, was characterized by Trevor Lawrence playing well, getting let down by everybody else. Let's eliminate that variable and make sure we're getting a fair evaluation of actually Trevor Lawrence and not everything else. Other moves that I've seen made this morning, the Colts signing linebacker Zaire Franklin to a 3-year, $31.2 million extension. Obviously, he was one of their own. They're bringing him back before free agency starts.
Yeah, he had a monster year last year. I remember he had, through week 8 or 9, he had the record for the most tackles, in PFF's database. And again, tackles are not the greatest stat in the world, but also had 60 defensive stops, was all over the place. I'm guessing that the real value there is a good bit below the 31.26. I think it'll be in the mid-20s if I had to guess, but don't mind that deal at all. I have heard this morning, having some conversations, and we'll see, but that mid-tier at linebacker, we've now gotten Drew Tranquill. Now I think this falls into that bucket. There is some optimism. Basically, teams saying, hey, look at last year. San Fran, Baltimore, Kansas City, and Detroit. All of those teams have prioritized off-ball linebacker. They've used either money or top draft capital there, or they've ensured they have, 2 or 3 or 4 guys there, not one good player and a bunch of stopgaps. There are some optimism that those kind of mid-tier linebackers are going to do better than they have the last couple of years, which, has been not very good at all in free agency.
And then the other element before we get into free agency proper is we are reaching how to term this. This is the season where teams are approaching players for pay cuts, Hey, we would love to bring you back, but not at that number. We're going to need you to take we're going to need you to take a pay cut in order for you to stay on this roster, and if not, you're getting cut. So apparently, Arik Armstead was approached and did not love that scenario. No, actually, I quite like the money I'm on right now, so release me if you're going to do that. And that's the way they apparently are going. Kyle Juszczyk was another one reported this morning that the 49ers are approaching for a pay cut. So I guess let's start with Arik Armstead. What will his market be given his stature at this point?
Yeah, so, I know people get kind of surprised by name brand, name value. Armstead, to me, and Justin Simmons are the two, I wouldn't say surprises necessarily, but scenarios where I thought something probably would have or could have been worked out. Armstead was owed $18.2 million. The issue with him is the last 2 seasons now, he's missed a bunch of time. I think he's played 600 total snaps in the regular season over the last 2 years. So, That said, I mean, he is still a really, really good pass rusher. You can play him as a kind of a base end, or obviously just on the interior. He can win in a lot of different ways. It's tough with the cap casualties. Like, I hate throwing numbers out just because it's a little bit of a different. I don't know if injuries are still an issue. I saw he had an arthroscopic knee surgery or something like that. I saw reported last night. But look, it's a strong mark of this position. He was owed 18.2, and he chose to not take a pay cut and to say, I'll do better than that.
Right.
So I think 2 years, 25, or maybe 2 years, 30, and you're banking on, guarantees stay in. You still make a good chunk of change, and maybe if you have a great 2024, you get a little upward adjustment because that position has also aged very well recently, where guys are playing, into their early to mid 30s. So, still a huge fan of Armstead. I think a lot of teams should be in the mix there. That's a big name to be added to the list, 48 hours before free agency.
Yeah, 30 years old for Armstead, coming off a career year in terms of pass rushing efficiency and PFF grade from a pass rushing standpoint, 86.5 last season, which is pretty spectacular. 58 total pressures over the course of the year, including the playoffs. An overall grade of 78.4 because his run defense wasn't as good. But, he is this... not unique. He is an unusual body type, 6'7", 300, 290, that kind of thing, with pass rushing skills that can operate inside, outside. Like, there's a lot of teams that should be interested in that kind of skill set.
Absolutely. Because I really do think you can move him around a good bit. So, and he's also, I think he's been their Walter Payton Man of the Year multiple times. I think he's a great dude, and maybe they find a way to bring him back. I will say, it makes me think they are just like Javon Hargrave last year. I mean, we know the Niners, what they like to spend at. Are they in the Danielle Hunter market? Are they in, one of those markets where people aren't kind of talking about it enough? That's what the Niners do. They want to spend on defensive line.
They've also, the Niners have taken a few players off the Chiefs in recent seasons. Maybe they could trade to L'Jarius Sneed and say, well, okay, if we can't beat them in the Super Bowl, in the game, let's just keep chipping away at their roster until eventually we have all of their players and we beat them by virtue of having Kansas City's cast-offs. So maybe they'll...
I think they went after Spagnuolo too, right? Yeah. So they're really just, if you can't beat them, poach from them. I respect it.
If you can't beat them, just erode the players they have until they beat themselves, and then you're there. So
Simple game.
Maybe they're in the L'Jarius Sneed sweepstakes.
Detroit is interesting there. Maybe that's, again, like the calculus of Graham Glasgow instead of Jonah, because we can go do this. Atlanta was the only one I heard personally, and then I've seen a bunch of reporters mention them too, so it seems legit to me. I haven't heard others. There was that article that had 8 different teams. I'm blanking now on who wrote it, but it was a good report. Tyler Dragon, I want to say, is who wrote that report, and he always has good intel. So it's a long list of teams. I still don't think you're getting a first-round pick for him, but I think you're getting a second, maybe some more on top of that. And I think, he's an immediate upgrade to pretty much every secondary in the NFL.
All right, so let's wrap this up with a prediction or two from each of us. I guess, who's your favorite prediction for free agent to team heading into the legal period, the actual movement portion?
I think Houston, it's funny because we had Nick Caserio experience has been you come in on these mid to lower tier 1-year deals. That's going to pivot, in my opinion. I think they are going to make a massive splash. Is that a Christian Wilkins? Is that a Danielle Hunter? I went with Christian Wilkins. Sheldon Rankins, a pending free agent. So I think, all right, you lose Rankins. You have Malik Collins, who's a good player, but throw in a Christian Wilkins who, Clemson guy, goes down to Houston, and I just think transforms that defense, frees things up for Will Anderson and others. I think that's my favorite one is big Christian Wilkins going for 4 years, $100 million down to Houston.
This whole Nick Caserio reign is going to be fascinating because everything is in flux right now in terms of not even just credit, but dynamics with that Patriots dynasty. Like, who was pulling the strings? Who set the approach? Who determined this is the way things, who created the Patriot way? And I don't mean that as a culture thing. I mean, in a sort of structural roster construction, how they went about things. Because it always just got lumped together, right? It's just the Patriots. This is what they do. But there's been a lot of Patriot way type moves in Houston since Nick Caserio arrived there. And it's just without Tom Brady, it doesn't look the same, right? It's like the Patriots did this for years. It's just when Brady's there, they all look like genius moves that all work out, and you bring in all these guys for almost nothing, and they turn into, the Teddy Bruschi's, the Mike Vrabels of the world, and you look like geniuses, right? When you don't have a Tom Brady, it just looks like you're adding random guys for 1 year, $3 million. It doesn't work. But now the Houston Texans have C.J. Stroud and Bobby Slowick and DeMeco Ryans and like the core of a team there. So I am actually fascinated. Does it happen the way you said, where they go, okay, now's the time to deploy, serious resources and make a big splash? Or is actually Nick Caserio steeped in this Patriot way type of approach, and they just keep business as usual? It's just now with C.J. Stroud, the moves look better.
Yeah, which is the razor's edge again. It's all so funny, and like the Dalton Schultz thing, he goes there, signs a 1-year flyer for cheap, and if C.J. Stroud was Bryce Young, then he's signing on another 1-year flyer for cheap somewhere else. Instead, he signs a near top of market extension. So it is, the Caserio thing. It is interesting. I mean, they could just kind of continue business as usual and just say, all right, we're gonna let the young guys just be the driver of this team. I think they're gonna have some element of, let's maximize this rookie contract for C.J. Stroud as much as we can.
Did you see the comments from Dalton Schultz about what playing in Dallas was like?
I did. The zoo nature of people watching you lift weights was pretty weird. I'll say.
Add it to the Jerry Jones is my billionaire hero folder. Like the Dalton Schultz, I think it was on McAfee. He said this. He said that when you were like, Dallas had a 2-way mirror set up in the weight room so that like they would take fans on tours of the building, and you would be in there like doing a set, and there would be people just like staring at the window at you, like at you working out, lifting weights. That's top tier billionaire. It really is. I have no notes. It's perfect. It's beautiful. It's exactly what I would expect from Jerry.
It really is almost like a joke you'd seen like a Simpsons episode about like how Jerry Jones runs the Cowboys, but it's actually like reality. Yeah.
Perfect. I love that. Anyway, that's a slight deviation from the show. Okay, my favorite prediction. I brought this up before, but I feel like if I was going to put one player on one team right now as a significant move, Danielle Hunter going to the Los Angeles Rams is now my favorite connection that I've been making. Hunter, so we've had this discussion ad nauseum on the PFF NFL podcast. There are not many players that are proven, consistent, quote-unquote finishers from a pass rushing standpoint, guys that get more sacks, more of those impact plays relative to the number of plays that they create. Obviously, T.J. Watt is the most obvious example because of the whole T.J. Watt versus Myles Garrett thing. But Danielle Hunter has always been one of those players. It's been T.J. Watt, it's been Chandler Jones, and kind of Danielle Hunter, and that's maybe it over the last sort of 10 years worth of data. If you pair a guy that has been a consistent finisher with a player in Aaron Donald, who I think is still the single greatest exponent of causing pressured players in the first place, create pressure, finish pressure, boom, all the sacks. That's what's going to happen there. And you got Byron Young, who had a good rookie season as part of the puzzle as well. Like the Rams, they've got a first-round pick. I don't think they're going to be trading them away anymore. But I don't think that means they're out of the splashy move, big player market.
I think they're in it squarely. I'm with you. I think they will do something today. I love Hunter. Yeah, he would have like 20 cleanup sacks in one season from Aaron Donald, Kobe Turner, and Byron Young. Yeah, I think they need to be in that market to a degree. I don't know, maybe they don't go that big, but like you have the end of the Matthew Stafford era, the Cooper Kupp era. Like it's probably 2-3 years for all those guys, and I think they're going to try to chase what they can with that group.
Nice, love it. Yeah, I'd forgotten Kobe Turner exists as well. Dude, that's a monster of a defensive line if they manage that and land that signing. Since this is the Chicago Bears news hour today on this show, did you see the report that the Bears are potentially moving to a dome with their next stadium just south of Soldier Field? What
Thank
is
goodness.
That? Chicago going into a dome.
No, I'm sick of bear weather. I'm sick of home field advantage. If there was an advantage, maybe the Bears would have won something in my lifetime. There's no advantage. It's just cold. Soldier Field stinks. If a Bears fan disagrees with that, they're lying. I love it. We're going to have the Final Four March Madness there. We're going to have all these events. We're going to host a Super Bowl in the next 10 years. I love it.
I'm disappointed in you, Brad. Look, I will happily admit that Soldier Field might not be great. However, I feel like we can't just have this sanitization of home stadiums so that everything is now in a dome and indoors and, air conditioned and a constant 67 degrees temperature. We need weather. Weather should exist. I don't care if it's worse for the team that's at home. I don't care if Cleveland is going to lose a bunch of games because it rains in October. I just don't care. I need weather that is different to just this pure, pasteurized, sanitized, environment that's going to be every dome in the NFL at some point.
Samuel, the Chicago Bears franchise, the founding franchise of the National Football League, has never had a 4,000-yard passer at any point ever, and has never thrown 30 touchdown passes in a season.
Yeah,
I hear you. Every Bears fan agrees with you. Caleb Williams, he's a warm weather guy. He's been in Cali. He's in Oklahoma. He wants a dome. Build the kid a dome.
I refuse to believe that the Chicago Bears' record in futility from a passing standpoint is because it gets cold in Chicago late in the season. I'm not doing that. I refuse.
It's not the main driver. It's not.
So it's not a valid excuse. Just because they're going to have to wear gloves and Tom Brady's going to have to get in his wetsuit a couple of times a year. No. Suck it up. It's weather. It's football. The Chicago Bears have been playing outdoors in the freezing cold since the 1920s. We can keep going.
Yeah, fire off that rugby tweet you showed me before the show. That just to get the juices flowing on real, just a man's sport, outdoors, in the elements. That can be you can build that argument more and more that football's for pansies and rugby's for the real tough guys out there.
No, they don't play rugby when it's minus 12 outside the way they did in Kansas City. They shut that thing down. Otherwise, forget the players. Otherwise, everybody in the stand is getting frostbite the way they did in that Chiefs-Miami game.
Yeah, probably wise to not do that.
Yeah. All right, I think that's going to do it for the PFF NFL podcast today. Steve is away for the moment. He had a family emergency, so he's traveling. I actually don't have any idea if he's available on Wednesday or Thursday. So I think it might be you and me, Brad, for the week talking free agency. So anyway, thank you for tuning in on the Monday show. We will be back on Wednesday and then Thursday. Talk to you then.